Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
And they were singing, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, this'll be the day that I die. This'll be the day that I die. I hope to infect, Craig's infect, over and over.
Yeah. That did happen, actually.
Did
a lot.
happen.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Jimmy Wong.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
And you are listening to The Command Zone. It's a podcast about Commander. And we have a very fun, exciting episode today. But of course, we also have a little bit of upkeep to do. So let's get right to it. First up, and very importantly, this show is brought to you by the one, the only CardKingdom.com, Seattle's greatest LGS, if I may say so myself. It's also one of the best online stores, and you can support the show by buying through our affiliate link.
CardKingdom.com/CommandZone. It's almost time for the holidays. It's time to buy awesome gifts for all your friends. Card Kingdom is the place to get them.
Actually, if you look behind Josh's head, they have the
You
Plane
got one
Chase
already?
anthologies.
I haven't ordered mine yet.
I sleeved it all up. I'm ready to play. I'm
Really?
very excited. Yeah.
Well, I lost my invitation.
Do you want to not? We could just skip the podcast today. Just play some Plane Chase instead.
Tempting.
Yeah, but it's a great place. Again, they have super fast shipping. You can buy something, it'll get to you within like a couple of days. It's perfect for the holidays, and especially if you're like doing some last minute shopping.
That's what I always do. Last minute shopping. I don't actually know if there's another kind of shopping.
Nope.
Yeah, it's like the 22nd. Oh crap! Oh crap! Oh crap! That's when Card Kingdom is great. Actually.
Yeah.
Something else that's great.
Yeah.
We just came out with another gameplay video.
Ooh, and there's a name for it and everything. Now, the first gameplay video that we did was for Commander 2016. It was just the pre-constructed deck straight out of the box, and it was called Out of the Box. But we realized
that's not going to work for normal gameplay videos.
Yeah, and everyone really dug the original video, so of course we had to do more, and especially because now we have a Patreon, and our patrons are directly responsible for giving us the funding and support that we need to keep making these gameplay videos for you guys.
Right, so the series is called Game Nights. Game Kniggets, as the Monty Python people would say.
Yeah.
Game Nights, and the first episode of Game Nights is out. We actually play the Cadell and Bruce Tarl deck that I talked about last episode, and the Brea deck that Jimmy talked about on that same episode. So you can see those in action. You can also see our frequent co-host, I guess, Craig Blanchett, and he's doing his favorite thing, which is infecting everyone.
Yeah, and this is the first time we've ever actually really seen it, I guess, on
first time you guys will see it.
Guys.
We've seen it many times.
Yeah, and it's great. Our friend Vinny also joined the show with the Kaneos and Tiro deck. So it's awesome. If you guys go to patreon.com/commandzone, you can find out all about how you can support the show. And also, our patrons got an early access look at the entire episode before anyone else. So we're always going to be helping out our patrons because they're helping us make the content possible.
Yeah, if you like the gameplay video, if you like Kitchen Table Fables and stuff like that, of course, if you like the Command Zone, which I hope you do because you're listening right now, then patreon.com/commandzone is the place to go to make sure we keep making that content that you like.
Yeah.
Speaking of that very first video out of the box, the guy that got us the product early, ahead of time so we could make that video, is actually on the line. We've got Trick Jarrett from Wizards of the Coast.
Hello, Trick.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Great.
It's so awesome to have you on. We've been talking about this for a long time. We're happy it could finally happen.
A very long time.
Totally. It feels like we've been talking about this for years, and you guys messaged me with like 4 days notice. Thanks a lot.
I think it actually has been years. I first really got to meet you at the Community Cup 2 years ago, I think, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, Trick, you play a ton of Commander. You should come on the show sometime.
You're always tweeting about Commander, and we're always like, we should get you on the show, and you're always like, I should be on the show, and then, it finally happens.
I'm excited to finally be here.
You should all follow Trick on Twitter at TrickMTG. Trick, you do this awesome thing where you are constantly upgrading your decks and you show what cards you're taking out and what cards you're putting in from new sets or just have new ideas. And I think that's actually really informative for someone that either plays Standard or likes to keep up with current sets and also wants to upgrade their decks at the same time.
Yeah, I sort of view myself as the guy who fixes up old cars of Magic. like my hobby isn't. I mean, I'll draft and I'll play other types of Magic, but Commander is the main way I play, and half of the fun for me is upkeep and maintenance of these decks and finding new crazy cards that I've never thought of or that I haven't seen other people play and going, oh, let me throw this in here and see how it does.
Yeah, that is a novel thing, especially when someone else goes, wow, I've never seen that card played before, and it's doing work.
It's the best when you play a
Yep.
card and they literally like take out their phone to take a picture of it. 'Cause they're like, I got to remember that one.
That is the best feeling.
It's just like, I win. I don't care what happens in the game.
Now,
Yep.
you're a car mechanic for EDH, but what is your actual job title at Wizards of the Coast?
So my official title is manager, community and content for Magic, or the more easily spoken title is the global content and community manager for Magic. So I oversee largely my role now focuses on our community team here in the U.S. and abroad, and I work closely with Blake on the content side of things and with the brand managers and all that sort of stuff to talk about and figure out how we're going to talk about and when we're going to talk about the sets and all of that sort of fun stuff.
That's awesome. And so, of course, you work very closely with all of our good friends, for instance, the Magic the Amateuring people. We've had Allison Lures on the show before, who you also work with. So you are obviously a very well-known and well-liked figure, Trick, because we love you.
I'd say
Well,
a lot
thank
of the
you.
time when we have product from Wizards, it's coming from Trick. I mean, like the standard Showdown packs from last episode were from Trick. So he's the guy to thank for a lot of that stuff. So let me just say on behalf of our listeners, thank you, Trick.
Thank you, Trick.
Well, thank you very much. And my inbox hates you because I know I'm going to come back to a bunch of email next after this episode, but that's all
Trick,
right.
give us
No,
the
it's true.
world.
Like, it's very true. Part of my job is helping. I focused more on my internal side of things, but a lot of what I do externally is focus on the connections and talking to the folks who create content for Magic, whether they're article writers, site runners, streamers, podcasters. And so I talk to them fairly regularly, and I try to keep in touch. And if they have something they want to do, if they want to interview somebody, if they want to get some information, then I try to be either the go-to resource or be the hub that they can come to, and I can put them in touch with the right person.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah.
Can you get us in touch with Trick?
because we want to talk to him about Commander. We hear he plays a lot.
Oh man, hang on a second. Let me get him on the phone for you. I've got his cell. I'll get you.
Oh, perfect.
So, Trick, how often do you get to play Commander?
It will vary. I happened to play yesterday during the day. I got
Nice.
a game in, and then speaking of, there goes my phone. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's Trick calling.
Trick's getting back to me. Yeah. So I would say on average, I play probably once a week. At a peak, I'll play 2 to 3 paper games over the course of a week. There's a weekly Commander group that meets up at Wizards on Fridays. It's pretty common for the company to be. Everyone does half-day Fridays, and so there's a group that meets up starting at like 1:00, and people can play. And there's probably a dozen or so who meet regularly, and then there's others who rotate through. I don't play with them super regularly, but I play with them sometimes. And then there's the play group that is on my team, on the content team. Blake Rasmussen, the content editor, content manager for Daily MTG, is a big Commander player, and the others on our team. And just having people I go to and hang out with, Scott Larrabee, Ron Foster, all those sorts of people also. So I would say on average I probably play 1 to 2 games a week. Obviously that'll drop to none depending on what's going on, and sometimes it'll spike even higher. But yeah, I play a fair bit.
It sounds like there's a lot of Commander being played at Wizards, though. That's that's a couple of different groups.
Yeah. Just pick up games sort of happening here and there, and
Yeah.
a weekly group as well.
That's really cool.
It's definitely present. I don't want to give the belief that it's in anywhere near the level of play for, say, drafting or sealed or things like that. But it's definitely got a good presence at Wizards.
Now, obviously, everyone at Wizards loves this game, and they're playing it because they love it. Do you find that the play group at Wizards, or the people that you play with, tend to be more combo-centric? They want to win more? Are they all about
interesting.
pimping out their decks? Yeah, I want to know like that kind of mentality, and if it's just very widespread as well.
I would say there's a lot of diversity. The Friday group tends to be more on the competitive side, playing to win. I definitely
Makes sense.
lean on the I'm just here to hang out with friends and happen to be playing Magic while we're hanging out. There's a pretty good diversity. I would say it probably trends slightly towards the casual Commander, do silly things, less than make the most cutthroat deck possible. unless you're playing with Blake Rasmussen, who is, of course, the con of value and always out for the win.
You know, it's funny, and I should plug something here. Recently on Commander Versus, which is a YouTube show that you can find, Jeremy Knoll had approached us and wanted a deck from us, so I gave the Tim deck, and they got a deck from the Professor. Mm-hmm. They got a deck from Commanderin, the podcast, and they got one of Blake's decks.
Oh, yeah.
And so they played all the decks. And so if you find that episode, I think it says Riku of Two Reflections, but it's really the Tim deck from me. Fun episode. But yeah, so I got to virtually play against Blake, which was fun. And I beat him. I crushed him.
Oh, nice.
You did.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think he sent in his rune deck.
Yeah,
if
he
I
did.
remember.
Oh, boy.
Which is a fun one.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw the pre-release for Kaladesh, but Blake just jammed Panharmonicon in his deck just for maximum utter value.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
It was straight awesome. Yeah, that was incredible.
Yeah, Blake I call him the con of value because when he joined us, it was around Cons of Tarkir, and he plays Magic to gain value. That is his core pleasure center for Magic. And he has a mono white commander deck. I forget which commander it is, but it's really a blue deck that's just masquerading as a white deck. I think it's a Heliod as the commander.
Wow,
interesting.
Very interesting.
And he built that because I had given him so much trouble for always playing blue. And
so he was like, hey, watch this. I can build something that's not blue.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And
I'll
it ends
get
up
my
being
value.
almost blue.
You watch. You just wait and see.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that competitive-esque spirit. It's not necessarily like hardcore, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to level up my deck so you can't beat it anymore. But it's like, hey, I'm going to challenge you to do something new with your deck.
Right.
And Blake obviously rose to the challenge, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Atraxa, because we're going to discuss your Atraxa deck, sort of what you've done to it, why you made the choices that you have. I'll read Atraxa really quick, just so that I think most people know, but just in case. Mm-hmm. Atraxa Praetors Voice is the white, blue, black, and green 4-color commander, so redless, for a 4/4 with flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink, and says at the beginning of your end step, proliferate. Again, proliferate is you choose any number of permanents and or players that have a counter of them on them, and then you add one of those counters. So you can simultaneously give all your guys that already have a +1/+1 counter another one, and give that player over there that has one infect 2 infect. So
it's pretty good. Proliferate is one of those things that it seems like, oh, you're only doing it on the end step one time. It's like, when there are a lot of counters on things, you're not doing it just once. You're doing it across a whole laundry list of things. And we got to play against a little infect deck with Atraxa as well, and that was real rough.
Oh, man, yeah.
I'm assuming that's not the course that you took with your deck here.
No, and I'll be honest with you, that never really crossed my mind.
Oh, because you're a good person.
Yeah.
That's right, because at heart I'm a good person, and I don't want people to hate me after we play Magic. Though now that you say it, it is interesting. Like,
we just doomed everyone at WotC.
No, I have a different deck that's my spiky deck that I break out when I need to.
Mm-hmm. We all have that deck, I think, which is, I guess in Blake's case, it's every deck, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So mine is basically just continuing the theme from the pre-con. I'm not taking it in any new directions yet. I definitely had some interesting ideas that I might do down the road. So what the deal is that I have a commander deck box or a quiver that I carry, and it fits 5 decks, and those 5 are the ones that I consider an active rotation. Mm-hmm. And I always keep one of them to be a modified version of a pre-con.
Oh,
so
cool.
It was Daxos on, what was it? The black-white Daxos from the 2015 Commander decks.
Jimmy's like, let me look behind me because I have it right here.
Yeah, it's on the shelf.
Unhallowed or something like that.
The Return. One black white.
Return, that's it.
Yeah.
And so that was the one that was in here that Atraxa replaced. And so I never take the commander and build it from the ground up. I take it and modify the deck that I got out of the box.
Oh, that's
so
great.
The first step for me, I chuckle because it's such a working at Wizards sort of thing, which is I took the deck and then I took literally a bundle, a fat pack box of singles that I have that is just a collection of random cards from either past commander decks or things I traded for. Mm-hmm. And I just looked through it and went, okay, this will fit in, this will fit in, this will fit in. And that's sort of what ended up being this first set of changes that we're going to talk about.
That's great. And so this box that you have, how do cards make their way into it?
Quite literally, it's usually like a weekend where I'm home alone and the wife's out, or I've got some time and I just go through the stuff that I have and I go, okay, this is a commander card. I might play it sometime, or there's an interesting idea here, or it's a commander staple that I just know I need multiple copies of, things like that.
Let's rewind for a second here, Trick, because I'm curious. There were a bunch of decks to choose from, 5 specifically. Yep. So what made you sort of drawn towards Atraxa as opposed to one of the other ones?
So I had played them all at some point during development, and then when they came out, Atraxa was the one that just I liked the most. I like Proliferate as a mechanic. I think it's really interesting. I like that it's not a commander that is immediately threatening to the opponent. Like one of my big frustrations when I play commander is if I so I have a Super Friends deck, and as soon as I start playing a planeswalker, no matter which one it is, no matter how threatening or not threatening it is, I immediately become the target. Right. And while Atraxa is a powerful creature, she's just a 4/4, and she relies on me having other things for her ability to actually be good.
Right.
And so from the table politics standpoint, that's attractive to me because it means that I have the opportunity to sort of sit back and not immediately be on the defensive when I pull my commander out.
That's actually a really good point, especially because if you were building this to be a Voltron deck, then obviously Atraxa is very dangerous because she comes out and it's like, holy crap, this thing's going to beat everyone down and it's going to be vigilant, it's going to gain you a ton of life. But in this case, if you're sticking towards sort of the pre-con build, she doesn't actually, and we found this to be the case too, unless you have a lot of other stuff going on, her entering the battlefield isn't terrifying. Right.
You just don't fear it, so then you don't like default setting attack the Atraxa deck because it's not like Atraxa herself is so scary. Whereas, Saskia might be a lot more scary.
Saskia comes down and someone already knows that,
You could just name me, and I can't even do anything because you attack somebody else, and it's just like, I can't even stop you. Like, it doesn't even matter what my board looks like. So,
yeah, certainly.
Yeah, so that's way more scary. So the default settings, like, maybe I have to just kill the Saskia deck fast, but Atraxa doesn't feel that way. It's really, I like that way of thinking about all commanders whenever you're choosing them, as sort of like a hidden power of that commander is that they're just less threatening.
Yeah. Right. Now, quick question. The Daxos deck, that was the sort of that filled the slot of the pre-con that you had modified. In this first draft that we're going to talk about today, we have about 10 cards that you took out and replaced for the Atraxa deck. How many cards do you think in the Daxos deck were taken out and replaced by the time that Atraxa made her way into the quiver?
Probably in the 20 to 30 range. Like I kept it enchantment themed. I kept it largely utility stuff. I didn't really take any serious change in path as I made those cards, but over the course of the year, I probably made 20 cards, maybe 30 card changes.
I like that. I like the idea of slow upgrading. I think one thing that intimidates a lot of people for Commander is here's just the Commander, build the whole deck around it. That's how I built my first deck. It came out awful. I spent way too much time putting stuff in there that I just didn't even think about knowing how it worked or anything. Yeah. So I highly recommend this, by the way, this strategy for anyone that's jumping into the format. And obviously it's worked out very well with these new precons because they're all pretty powerful.
And fun.
Yeah, this is like maybe the best year ever, I think, of Commander stuff since we've started the show at least.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, all these decks are great.
And you guys had access to these decks for a while at the office, right, to be able to play test and pass around and sort of see what was going on with them?
I would say people in the office definitely did. I played one round of them during early play test, as I recall. And then we got a chance to play with them probably a couple of months before release. But I wouldn't say that like I haven't been sitting here for 6 months thinking about this deck and figuring out what changes I was going to be making. Right.
Okay. Yeah. I was curious how that worked. Is it sort of a thing where like I'm just curious how it works within Wizards. Is there sort of like a sign up sheet like, hey, are you interested in playing with the new Commander decks, or like how does that work exactly?
Sign me up.
Part of it is being known to R&D and the folks there who need people there to play test. So like if R&D knows that I'm a Commander player, I'll get an invite to say, hey, come play Commander, and you'll show up and they'll hand you a deck and you sit down and play test with it. There's also a semi-regular play group, that sort of thing. But I don't want to dive too much into it because I'm not in R&D. I don't want to speak for them, but my involvement is usually someone emails me going, "Hey, Trick, do you want to play test?" And I'll go, "Sure."
Pretty cool job, though. I mean, sometimes you just get invited to go play Commander. I don't get that at my job, do you?
No, and we've stopped inviting Josh to play Commander with us as well, so this is a bit of a
wait a minute. That explains a lot.
just kidding. All right, well, let's go through some of the cards that you took out and some of the cards that you added into the deck. The first one up, I think, is a card that pretty much fits into any deck that has green in it. It's just Birds of Paradise. It's a green for a 0/1 flying bird, and you can tap it to add mana of any one color to your mana pool. And interestingly enough, you also took out a card that had basic land cycling, which was Migratory Route. So have you found any mana problems so far with playing these 4-color decks? I know that was sort of a concern of some people.
I haven't really. Even before I changed these cards out, the mana base is pretty solid. I just want... I mean, over the time, I'll definitely be upgrading this deck. And these were the ones, like the Birds of Paradise is a perfect example of one of those cards that I just consider a commander staple. Mm-hmm. Whenever I come across a copy, I throw it in this collect 'em box, and it's one that I pulled out when I was going through it for the deck.
Yeah, it's such a innocuous card that I think a lot of people see mana dorks like Elvish Mystics and stuff and go like, oh, but it can die so easily. At the same time, it's really hard to find a 1-mana card that's going to give you something of any color, which is why Birds of Paradise is just that good. So even if it does that, you're going to hopefully get some use out of it before the good old birds get perished.
I also actually kind of like it in this deck because it gives you value early and then it taps for mana. And later, if you can just start putting a couple counters on it, then it's going to grow and grow. And it's a flyer.
Yeah.
So it's possible for it to be like a 5/6 or a 6/7 at some point. And then it's like a real actual threat.
Yeah.
And not the most difficult thing for the Atraxa deck to accomplish.
Not to mention there is a lot of flavor here. I don't know if this was intended, but it's a Birds of Paradise replacing a Migratory Route, which creates bird tokens. So
were you like, listen, I'm taking out a bird, I got to put a bird in?
Sure, we'll go with that.
Now, another thing that is very common in the colors of green is tutors for creatures, and you threw in Eladamri's Call, which is green-white for an instant. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Tutors, they're always a controversial subject on the show. They're of varying power levels. What do you think about them in general? I mean, obviously you like them because it is in the deck.
Yeah, I think it was a conversation I had probably 6 or 7 years ago with Adrian Sullivan, who is known as a deck brewer and competitive Magic player, and his main complaint about Commander was the fact that, and I could be misattributing it, but I think it was Sullivan, talking about how in his mind, Commander would be better if there were no tutors, if you weren't allowed to tutor. Because allowing yourself to tutor sort of overcomes the inherent deck building restrictions of the format.
Ah, interesting.
And I try to walk the line. I don't want to put 10 tutors in my deck, but there's definitely value to having them. And Eladamri's Call is one of those fun, flavorful ones, and it's an older card that players don't necessarily know. And again, it was in my box, so it made it to this deck.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. Adrian Sullivan also notably is like he loves to play control and stuff too. And those decks play a lot of card draw, which in a way is a very slow form of tutoring. And I think he definitely has a valid point. I think people that over-tutor in Commander can sometimes their deck becomes closer to a constructed deck than anything else.
Right.
But, sometimes you have to find answers because someone else drew something off the top that is just going to dominate the board, or you need a utility creature for one reason or another to just make sure you're still in the game. So I, of course, approve.
Well, geez. I don't think we actually talked about Doubling Season on our episode about Atraxa.
We didn't.
This is a good card to add to this deck.
Probably one of the strongest cards you can add to any deck that likes counters or tokens or anything, really.
So I like the box that you've got here because you had Doubling Season in it.
Yeah, can I borrow your box? I'll take some cards out of it.
Did you just have it left over from the first Modern Masters? I don't know, but this card, Doubling Season... Oh, geez, it's a lot of text to read. It just doubles the amount of tokens and/or counters that you put on stuff, basically.
Notably for Planeswalkers as well, because you do have a Super Friends deck, right?
Yeah, it actually came out of the Super Friends deck because I felt like that was making it Well, so again, this goes back to I'm not the super spiky player, and I try to walk the line between the deck that everyone hates playing against and a deck that does cool stuff. And so I pulled it out of Super Friends because I felt like it was making it too powerful, too dominant. And that's just one of those things I do. I pulled Goblin Recruiter out of my Goblin deck because it was one of those decks, not Goblin, Recruiter.
Yeah.
It's Goblin
card's
Recruiter.
amazing.
I pulled it out because it was one of those cards that when I play it and everyone at the table stops having fun,
Right.
that's not a card that I unless it's critical to my deck's success, I'll pull it out.
That's
so
really
Doubling Season
interesting.
has made it to Atraxa. We'll see if it stays.
I will
seems
say
like
the power level is much lower here than it is in
Yeah.
Super Friends deck for sure.
It's way harder to sort of play Doubling Season and then in this deck play one card that just wins you the game after that.
Right,
Which
exactly.
is there's a million Planeswalkers that'll sort of do that with Doubling Season out. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
that's a cool philosophy, and it's interesting. I'm very loath to sort of power down my decks because it feels bad the next time I play them. So I usually just build new ones. But man, I wish I could. There's some decks where I'm like, sort of wish I could just pull a few cards out.
Hey, maybe now's the time.
Maybe you've inspired me, Trick.
Josh is just going to put in more card draw or something else, though.
More
Josh,
tutors.
whatever I can do to make you a better person makes me feel nice and warm.
We do want to
inside.
invite Josh back to the play group at some point. Now, I really like this edition because it's a card that I've always wanted to put in a lot of decks, and I think this is sort of the beauty of not limiting yourself to only the best, most powerful cards, which I know we've had some people talk to the show and be like, guys, all you want to do is win. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah. But also, sometimes it feels like it kills a little bit of fun. But Death's Presence is a card from Return to Ravnica, 5 in the green. It's an enchantment, so it's a 6-mana enchantment. And whenever a creature you control dies, put X +1/+1 counters on a target creature you control where X is the power of the creature that died. I don't know if you've played the Atraxa deck a lot, but I feel like this is one of those cards that comes out and just utterly dominates.
To be honest, it hasn't gotten its chance to shine since I've added it yet, but I, from past experience, completely agree with your expectations.
What other decks has it been in the past, or have you seen it played against you?
It's been played against me. I think it was I want to say it was in a Ural Mist Stalker deck. I want to say I've seen it one other time, but I can't remember what deck it would have been in. But this is just one of those cards that enchantments as a whole in Commander tend to be hard for people to remove. It's the card type that has the least removal default in people's decks.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those enchantments that becomes a must respond to scenario for a lot of, like, if it's in the deck, then the deck is usually built to take advantage of it.
Right.
And this is one of those scenarios.
It's one of those cards that, like, it makes it really hard to sort of take your opponent's board presence down because you kill that creature and that thing gets a whole bunch of counters and you're like, well, I didn't really do myself any good by doing that. You kind of have to board wipe or nothing.
Even sometimes board wipes that are only like damage based.
Yeah.
Because you have a 30/30 or whatever.
Or they manage to save like one creature and then all of a sudden they're just going to kill you with the crackback. Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like a little like Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, which is another of the partner commanders that came out in C16. So, yeah. Oh, this is a cool one.
Yeah, you want to read it?
So, Jenara, Asura of War. I don't know what an Asura is, but that's a 3-mana green, white, blue for a 3/3 flying legendary angel. You can pay 1 and a white, put a 1/1 counter on Jenara, and again, it doesn't tap or anything. So as much as you've got 1 and a white, you can put that many counters on.
Yeah,
Man, why didn't we talk about this card before? This theme seems perfect.
Yeah, it is perfect because it creates something very similar to Atraxa that benefits from Atraxa and also just can get huge. I mean, I think some people build Voltron decks around this, obviously, but I mean, it's awesome. It's like a green Mantis Rider on crack.
Yeah, it just
Pretty
feels
much.
like you get it out for a couple turns and you're just gonna destroy somebody because, I mean,
It just gets huge.
it's gonna get ginormous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jenara, I sort of view, it's not just Jenara, but it's a class of creatures I view as sort of like, it's almost like a flag bearer. They come out on the table, and even though mechanically they don't force opponents to target them, table politics-wise they force opponents to target them.
Right.
And so Jenara is a great example of one that, as you said, when she comes out, she is threatening inherently, just by her built-on mechanic, and then with Atraxa, she becomes even more threatening. But again, she's the one threatening by virtue of having Atraxa out rather than having them targeting Atraxa. So either she's going to bash your face, or you're going to be forced to respond to her.
I feel like if I had to target one of the two and they're both swinging at me, I would probably go for Jenara, unless I was in danger of dying to commander damage, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And also the fact that Jenara costs 3 mana, so you can play her the turn before you play Atraxa. And now the opponent's in a really sticky situation where if they can't board wipe, they can only kill one. Which one? They're both kind of bad. And you're right. I think in that case, you kind of got to go for the bigger immediate threat, which is Jenara, which if your deck is playing something that protects its commander, you know, at the very least for 3 mana, that's pretty good. And then a lot of times they're just like, oh, well, I don't even have an answer. And then they just die.
Then they're going to take 10 in the air, 12 in the air, dead.
That's my favorite sort of response.
A question I had, and actually it's just maybe more of a statement, but it seems like the ads you're making here really help sort of put up little pillars, I suppose you would call them. If Atraxa is a pillar in the deck where you can play it and it can definitely, hopefully, eventually kill someone, so is a card like Jenara, and so is a card like the Armory of Iroas, which is an equipment that whenever an equipped creature attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, which works perfectly with the deck. It seems like it's a really interesting idea to not just focus everything on just Atraxa. Like Atraxa's ability affects everyone, but every creature has the ability to get huge. Even the Birds of Paradise we talked about earlier could be a lethal threat eventually.
Yeah, definitely. That might be a holdover philosophy from back when you could tuck commanders. But now in the era where we can't tuck commanders, it's less critical. But also it's just good deck building that sometimes you need to have multiple threats and multiple ways to get your deck going. There's nothing worse than being in a commander game and having your deck just firing blanks while everyone else is building up their armor.
Right.
I like that you said that because we still sort of espouse the virtues of making sure that your deck is still doing stuff even if something happens to your commander because of tuck. But also there are just times when because of commander tax or whatever, you just can't play your commander. And so it's good to have things in your deck that are going to, on their own, still win you the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you get to use cool cards like Armory of Iroas, which is actually something I may put into my Marchesa deck now that I think about it.
He keeps putting cards on that I'm like, man, we should have talked about this card.
Yeah, Armory is interesting. It's one that I don't think I've actually played in a commander deck before. It might have had a brief appearance in my Zergo
Helm Smasher
Mardu deck.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that it actually stuck around because for those equipments, I tended to want them to be more immediately threatening rather than long-term investments. But I'm interested to see how it does in this. It's another one that hasn't gotten to come up. I've probably played 3 to 5 games with some of these additions. So some of these cards just haven't gotten to be seen yet.
Let's talk about the cards that you took out and sort of why some of those choices were made. Because I think that's really interesting, too, and something that a lot of players run into, especially when they're building in this way, which is usually like a newer player that's trying to take a pre-con and sort of start to upgrade it over time. It can be hard to figure out which deck or which cards in the deck you want to take out. The first one on the list is Manifold Insights.
Yeah.
So this card is 2 and a blue. It's a sorcery. It says reveal the top 10 cards of your library, starting with the next opponent in turn order. Each opponent chooses a different non-land card from among them, and then you put the chosen cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. That sounds complicated. You flip over 10 cards. Each other player gets to pick one of the cards that you get, and then the rest go on the bottom of your library. So they sort of choose 3 or 4 cards for you, depending on how many people you're playing against.
They will, if everyone's playing the spikiest, choose the 3. If you're playing with 4 players, choose the 3 worst cards to put in your hand.
They'll give you all lands.
However, no, it's a different non-land.
Oh, it's non-land. Sorry.
Yeah. However, it's still 3 mana for potentially up to 3 cards if you're playing in a 4-player group, which seems pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have taken this out of the deck too, and I'm curious why Trick this sort of stuck out as something that you could replace.
Looking at the deck, when I looked at the variance of what people might pull out of the deck, what the variety of possibilities are, and what could I end up drawing out of this, I didn't feel like the possible return was going to be worth it because this is a card that I think is more well suited for something that makes use of dredge or just wants you to have a number of cards in hand rather than the choice of cards.
Right.
And I'm not really I don't have any of those decks. Like that's just not a thing that I'm keen on. And so this card I'm not interested in playing.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense too. And if you're not, I mean, for instance, a card like Scroll Rack would be great with Manifold Insights. You can really pick and choose. You can put 7 lands and 3 non-lands and automatically get those cards and filter through that part of your deck. But in this case, it seems like it's asking to get built around a little more. And otherwise, it just has a high level of potential just womp whiff.
It certainly doesn't interact with Proliferate in any way.
That's a good point.
Right.
There's also a counterspell in the deck, the one and only. We talked about this on the show. We thought it was kind of a weird addition to be in there, but Disdainful Stroke, 1 in the blue for a counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Are you a big counter kind of guy?
I will play counters. I'm not opposed to counters, but this isn't a deck where I'm particularly driven to. Like, I have I think 2 counters in the Super Friends deck, and in this deck again, I'm more interested in currently furthering the theme and building out some more things that Atraxa can work with than having a singleton counterspell.
Also, for us, I think if you're going to have a 2-mana counterspell, you can just put counterspell in and have no restriction.
Yeah, exactly. Just make it straight real counterspell.
Although I will say that when we played these out of the box, the Disdainful Stroke won me the game. So,
Yeah, no.
But any counterspell would have done it in that situation. So,
right.
Oh, here's an interesting one. This one actually knocked you out of the game.
Yeah, and it was a huge blowout when it happened. It's Grip of Phyresis. It's one of the cards I'm actually most excited about coming out because I love stealing cards. 2 in the blue for an instant. Gain control of target equipment, then create a 0/0 black germ creature token and attach that equipment to it.
But it's an instant. It's an instant.
Very interesting. Yeah, you just get stealing equipment, and then you can potentially block with it. You can take someone's. I mean, stealing equipment is something that you don't really see.
In the middle of combat?
In the middle of combat,
Yeah, that's the part that really messes you up. It's an instant.
But you took it out of the deck. Did you have a reason for that?
Unlike you, I'm not big on stealing things. That's definitely part of it.
He's a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah.
Well, it's just that usually if I want to steal things, I want my deck to, again, be focused on stealing things.
Right.
This is similar to the counterspell where it's this one-of effect that doesn't really do anything but give me a wacky sort of effect that I could do during the course of the game. And so when I look at the cards I add, even the Armory of Iroas, I would say, is more valuable to my deck as a whole than the Grip of Phyresis.
Right.
It sounds like you're skewing more towards cards where you know what it's going to do and when it's going to do it. Like something like Grip, sometimes against a lot of decks, it does nothing because they don't have
absolute nothing. Yeah.
So there's the person that may be your real enemy right now at the table might not be the one that has an equipment on their creature. In which case that card is just stone dead for you.
Yeah, and stealing that would be awful from someone else that may be trying to help you.
Because now all of a sudden you just made an enemy out of somebody and your real enemy is somebody else. Not the best policy.
Exactly.
Crystalline Crawler. I was really surprised, I think, to see that you'd taken this out. So it's the 4-mana artifact creature. It's a 1/1 and has Converge, though. So it enters with a number of 1/1 counters on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. And you can remove a 1/1 counter from it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it sort of is a mana dork, but it sort of can come in with up to 4 in this deck. Mana that you can sort of save from turn to turn, so to speak. It's kind of a little bit Gemstone Array.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it is a 1/1, so it's not like a 0/0 that will die if you cast it for just colorless, and it can slowly add counters onto itself, and it creates any colors of mana, which seems pretty good with Proliferate, right? You get to add more counters to it. It gets to slowly generate more value, potentially up to adding 2 extra mana every single time you get to Proliferate and tap it, but it's not in the deck.
Yeah, so actually, I think I led you astray in how I sent you the card changes that I made to the deck, because you were comparing Migratory Route to Birds of Paradise, which was a byproduct of how I picked the stack of cards up to type them in.
I figured.
It wasn't an order for order. And so to me, Birds of Paradise is what replaced this crawler.
Gotcha, okay.
And while it definitely has the interaction with Proliferate. The truth is that I have, in my time playing Commander, never really loved the counter-based mana effects, whether it's Gemstone Mine or things like this, because with the exception of things like the Cornucopia or the ones where Proliferate can let it make more mana,
Right.
But if it's just like, oh, you need to keep counters on this to be able to continue to produce colored mana or to produce any mana, then it's not something that I'm really keen to keep around because I think there are just better options.
That's a really good point, actually.
I would say also, Birds does feel, I think, a lot better in this deck than even Crystalline Crawler, possibly because Crystalline Crawler costs 4 mana.
Yeah.
Atraxa costs 4 mana. So you get into these weird situations where it doesn't help you ramp to your general. Where Birds, if you play Birds on turn 1, 2, then you're playing Atraxa possibly on turn 3, which is a lot better than playing, maybe Crystalline Crawler on turn 4 and then Atraxa turn 5.
Right.
I think both of those things can be good, but I can see where, like, just for speed reasons, a lot of times, like, ramp at 4 and 5 is just not as useful because by then you should be casting big things rather than ramping into big things even later.
Yeah.
Right.
And the comparison to Astral Cornucopia, I think, is great because you're right. That will add you 4 each time you tap it. Whereas for Crystalline Crawler, you're just getting a couple of extra counters. You have to remove them. So you're playing this more delicate game, and it just doesn't get you the straight value that you would just get out of a card like Astral Cornucopia with Proliferate.
I still really like Crystalline Crawler. I just want to say that for all the listeners out there.
Yeah.
But
No,
I
like it
I do
too.
think it's interesting how people sort of look at cards and what's the word? Evaluate them slightly differently. And, so many times I've talked to somebody and they've been like, laid something out. And I'm like, man, I never thought about that. You're right. Like,
Yeah.
It's good to keep an open mind about things like that because I think something people do is that you look at Crystalline Crawler and you don't think about it's 4 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
really easy to get caught in your sort of logic holes, like loops of like, well, this doesn't work because of this, and so it will never be good. It's like, whoa, or this is always good. You know,
Right.
I think those are really dangerous statements to get into, and it's always nice to talk to other people and figure out how they evaluate cards because everyone has a reason they're doing something, and that reason often has merit. Now, there are 2 cards that you took out in particular. Josh and I love board wipes, obviously. But there's Bane of the Living and Languish. Both of these are essentially cards. Languish is a sorcery. Bane of the Living is a morph creature. But their effects are to give -4/-4 to all creatures in Languish's case. And in Bane of the Living's case, it's -X/-X, depending how much mana you sink into it. Now, I think -4/-4 in Commander is pretty mediocre. It often won't get rid of a lot of the important things like the Avacins and the giant creatures that are really
The
threatening.
Ulamogs.
The Ulamogs, yeah. Bane of the Living's a little more flexible, but you have to put a ton of mana into it. I kind of think I know where the answer is going, but why did these 2 semi-board wipes come out?
For the majority of my decks, I don't really rely on board wipes unless I'm playing either a more controlling or a more Voltron-style deck. Like my Zergo deck is all about, I'm going to kill all your creatures and still be left holding Zergo.
Right.
And for Super Friends, it's like, I'm playing Planeswalkers, I'm going to keep all of your creatures off the board. And for this deck, in my mind, I really want to keep my creatures on the board as much as possible. And while I do have like the Chalice that gives a Cauldron of Souls.
Oh, yeah,
while it does have Cauldron of Souls
Right,
that helps
persist.
keep that happening, that's only a 1-card way of keeping them on the board. And when I looked at what I had in the deck, those 2 cards kill a lot of what is in my deck
Right.
if they have no counters.
Yeah, so you just don't want to be in a situation where like, well, I don't want to play this because I don't want to destroy my board.
Yeah, Languish kills Atraxa immediately if she has no
Right.
counters on her.
Yeah, and again, it's not like that is by no means me saying that having those in the deck is wrong. It's just in the way I want to play, I don't want to... I'm sort of taking the passive, I'm going to build up my army, and you guys do what you want to do. If you interfere, so be it, but I'm not really going to interfere with your guys' army.
I like
And
it.
then I'm going to crash in and destroy you.
Yeah.
Right?
Pretty much.
With
Yeah.
Jenara plus Atraxa, a little Army of Iroas.
Jenara's pretty good. I didn't realize.
Jenara's
I
nuts.
mean, it's 3 mana.
Janara is really good.
Yeah, that's a scary... If somebody plays Jenara on turn 3, every person at the table is like, don't attack me, don't attack me, don't attack me.
Yeah,
don't
anyone else
attack
but me, anyone else but me, please, please, please.
Yeah, player on turn 3, add 2 counters on turn 4,
It's just brutal.
and you're off to the races.
Yeah, certainly.
So we want to go into the cool stories portion of our podcast here, and I know you've only played the deck 3 or 4 times, but were there any moments now having played the deck where it really shined, or some cool synergy sort of fired off, or anything like that sticks out in your mind?
I mean, I've had one game where I just absolutely went nuts. I forget. I think we were all playing precons, and it was just one of those scenarios where what we were talking about at the beginning, where Atraxa wasn't that threatening, so I was largely left alone, and they were fighting amongst themselves. And then I just sort of started doing stuff. And then, if I recall correctly, I actually did cast. Manifold Insights, except that one of the guys was about to go out, and so he decided to give me Treasure Cruise.
He's like, I'm almost dead. I'll just give you the best card.
Yeah,
I love those
pretty
moments. I live for those moments.
Just in spite.
And so,
Yeah, like I'll give it to you. You haven't been doing anything yet. Take it out for me.
pretty much.
That's
So I had Atraxa out. I had Ishtai out. I had Soulbinders out. I brought Advocist out, and I was just going to town. I had Thrumming Bird, so I was going off with an attack every.
All your guys are just getting huge.
Yeah, just proliferate city.
And it was just one of those things where I just had the army, and none of them had board sweeps.
Those are the best times where you're just looking, and your board's just huge, and you're just swinging, and every time you just hold your breath, and they're like. And then they pass their turn, and your stuff's still alive. And then the next person passes their turn, and your stuff's still alive. And you untap, and you're like, really? Kill you all.
All right, everyone's dying now, yeah.
Pretty much.
It is a very good feeling indeed. So is there anything that you're also looking forward to upgrading or changing about it in the future through your small amount of play testing yet? Or is there anything that's sort of like, that was kind of cool how that worked or whatever?
Yeah, so I had, like I said, I'm looking for cards that I don't think people know about, or things that are perhaps not super well known. So I've got a card that I came across that I'm curious to see if you guys know what it is that I think I'm going to add to the deck.
Okay.
It's a Dissension uncommon, and it's Palliation Accord. Has anyone played this against you?
Palliation
Accord. I've never even heard that word before.
All right. This is going to be one of the fun cards I throw on the deck that's going to make people sort of roll their eyes, because it's...
What? I'm reading it right now.
Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, put a shield counter on Palliation Accord. Remove a shield counter from Palliation Accord. Prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to you this turn.
It's actually really good.
Yeah, especially in this deck.
Yes.
Wow. Look at that.
That's actually really good, yeah. Well, it automatically takes off 1 damage from every creature attacking you, at the very least.
As long as they don't have vigilance,
Yeah. But then, with Proliferate and some other...
Doubling season,
Also, it triggers when they attack each other. It doesn't care if they're attacking you.
Or if they're tapping a mana dork.
That's true. Oh, man, against my Tim deck.
Yeah.
Holy cow. I've never even heard of this card. This is awesome. Palliation Accord.
That was one of those cards I came across that I was excited about. Again, going back to the archives of cards I haven't played with in years, another card that I'm excited to throw in here, Phantom Nishoba.
Oh, yes. This is the green tiger with the most.
Green-white,
yeah. So this is a card that I've always wanted to play as well. 5 a green and a white for a 0/0 Cat Beast Spirit. Doesn't get much better than that. It's got Trample. Nope. It enters the battlefield with 7+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life, so old school lifelink. And if damage will be dealt to Phantom Nishoba, prevent that damage, and you remove 1 counter from him.
Oh, yeah. There's a few creatures with that last ability.
Yeah, so this is sort of like, again, the pillar. Another pillar in the deck that can just destroy everyone, because it's always going to get the counters back.
It's going to be very hard to
block, and it has Trample as well.
Yeah.
Oof. If this was a 14-14...
The art on this thing is sweet. It's like Ghost Tiger.
It is a Cat Beast Spirit.
It is. It's pretty
Jace,
sweet.
Please.
It's like, but anyway, I'm on radio and I'm trying to describe art. It's not going to work. Watch the video on youtube.com/the Command Zone podcast.
Yes, you should.
Totally.
I would love to see Phantom Nishoba finally see the light of day.
That's right.
Because this is a card that I've always wanted to play. It just seems so silly and great.
At 7, it's kind of expensive, but it seems like the combination between it and an Atraxa is just going to be super sweet.
Yeah, and it's another lifelink source as well with Atraxa. So,
good point.
You're gonna. With this deck, you kind of last a long time because you've got lifelink. You've got a lot of big creatures that need to get dealt with.
And Atraxa has Death Touch, which I think is really underrated, and Vigilance. So you always have 1 good blocker.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty sweet. Palliation Accord. Holy crap. My mind. I don't even know. I might not be able to be very much help for the rest of the podcast because my brain is just going, what other decks can I put Palliation Accord in? What decks can I go?
Making all your decks now.
There are a couple of other obvious cards that I just didn't have in the box and I haven't put in the deck yet because they're in use elsewhere. But like for more proliferate things like Contagion Engine and Inexorable Tide are the two obvious ones.
Yep. Those are both very good cards.
Also a card from not too far, actually a more recent card. Drana, Liberator of Malakir, definitely needs to go into this.
So yeah, whenever Drana, she's a flying first strike 2/3. Whenever she deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. So this deck again,
and she has first strike, so it actually happens before the rest of your creatures deal damage. It's awesome.
Very cool. I've always wanted to draft this card and play it, but I never saw it in the pack. It just looks so broken.
Yeah, in draft, it is broken. Yeah, it's crazy. It's broken actually in the Atraxa deck.
It is really powerful in draft.
Yeah. Well, you play this on turn 3 and then play Atraxa, and then
swing. Now she's a 4/5 first strike flyer because Atraxa will proliferate
at the end of turn. Yeah.
But also, I think one of the things with the Atraxa deck that we've seen, I don't know if you've had this experience, Trick, is that just getting the first counter on stuff is really where you want to be. Like you want, and once you get the first one, man, it's like a snowball rolling downhill. But it's just I got to get that first counter on stuff, and then the Birds of Paradise is even growing.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll tell you that having Atraxa out and having nothing that has counters is almost like even if you're doing stuff and it's just not making use of Atraxa, it's one of those feelings that I just have really disliked with the deck, so I'm looking for more ways to really jumpstart the counters on my permanents.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it as well. It's that early interaction. All right, well, I think that wraps us up talking about the deck. Trick, thank you for your insights. I really liked hearing your reasoning behind taking the cards out and stuff. I think that's really valuable for a lot of our listeners as well because it's always nice to have other perspectives in here. And hopefully we can all take it a little bit to heart. And Josh is going to build around Palliation Accord immediately.
I'm so excited about that card.
Yeah.
I'm going to order like 50 from Card Kingdom as soon as we get off here. So now we're going to go to the listeners. It's been a couple of weeks, Commander 2016. You've got your hands on it. Got your hands dirty, as it were. You've been able to tune up the decks, upgrade them, build whole new ones. We are really interested to hear what your cool stories are so far using the Commander 2016 legendary creatures. It can be the partners. It can be the 4-color ones. Yeah. I just want to hear the awesome, nasty stuff you're doing.
I want to know the best partner combination. And especially, give me the partner combination and one card that really makes that deck go nuts. Or actually even experiences. Do you ever have both partners out at the same time? Do you feel like it's just there for the colors or what? I'd love to see what you all think about that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I'm really interested. Yeah, the partners is a really good way to go because that's a tough nut to crack because there's so many combinations.
Sounds like an episode coming up soon on the Command Zone.
Help us out. Help us come up with an episode.
Yes, please. Before we move on to the end step, once again, this show is brought to you by the one, the only, CardKingdom.com. You can support the show by going to CardKingdom.com/CommandZone. That is our affiliate link. It lets them know that we've sent you there. And also, you can get some cool stuff really fast in the mail. There's no reason not to do it.
Just leave some Palliation Accords for me, okay? Don't order them all before I have a chance to. That's all I ask.
Well, this won't come out for a few more days, Josh, so
I'm
you're going to be safe.
I'm getting some foily ones just for Jimmy Wong.
Just for me. I'll take a few.
All right, now it's time for the end step where we talk about something cool outside the world of Magic. Trick, you have something cool.
I think it's very cool. I'm a huge soccer fan. I love soccer. I love football, as the rest of the world calls it, but here in America we call it soccer.
Mm-hmm. Does it ever? It's sort of like you bashfully say soccer, right? Like I do when I have to call it soccer, but you have to call it soccer because you live in the United States. But it's really football.
It's football, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I felt that way, and then I learned that while it's definitely majority called football, and also learning why it's called soccer. And learning that, for example, Italy calls it calcio or a more Italian pronunciation of that, because they have another game that they refer to as football.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Wow.
And that makes it made me more comfortable calling it soccer.
That makes me more comfortable too, because So, who's your team?
Well, which league are you asking me about? Because I follow a number of teams around the world.
Okay, well, who's your if you only had one team in all of football? What team would it be?
Well, it would have to be the local team, the Seattle Sounders.
Woo! Go Sounders!
See, I'm from Portland, so I'm a Timbers guy.
Oh boy, the Sounders.
But do you
what
actually
what
follow them,
team.
or are you just saying that because you're from Portland?
I mean, I don't really follow, but if I ever would turn on the TV or look at an article or anything else where there's the Timbers involved, then I naturally have to root for them.
Yeah.
I see.
But you guys did pretty well this year.
We're still doing very well, thank you.
Sorry, you're doing well. That's my bad.
We have our final. We're playing in the MLS Cup on December 10th, which will probably be. I don't know what day you guys are putting this out, but
It won't have happened yet.
Yeah, not
it'll
yet.
be still in the future, and we're going to be playing it in Toronto, which will be very cold. My wife and I seriously considered going to it,
Oh,
Really?
wow.
and the only reason we didn't was that we went on a trip earlier this year, and she has her niece coming to stay with us that weekend. So
Well, make sure you make the niece feel bad for making you miss a sweet
I
soccer
plan
game.
to.
I think the Nice is saving you from some really cold weather.
Yeah, Toronto's gonna be real chilly in
I
December.
think you're going to be like, thank you to the Nice,
I
because
went
I
to a
could
pro
still watch it
tour
on my
in
TV.
Montreal in February. I can handle the cold,
Yeah, there you
but
go.
it would definitely be a cold night.
Who are they playing against?
So they're playing against Toronto FC, who both of us, this is the first time the teams have made it to the MLS Cup, so it's super exciting.
Oh wow.
The Sounders have made the postseason every season since they joined MLS 8 years ago. And this year was a huge emotional roller coaster. We were in last for several weeks. We struggled really hard. We actually fired our coach, who had been our coach since we joined MLS,
Whoa.
hired the assistant to be the interim head coach. He and a few signings in the middle of the season helped turn the season around and got us to the postseason. And then we made it to we're here at the MLS Cup with a chance to finally win the trophy that we want the most.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. In last place?
We
That doesn't
were
happen-
for a while in last place in the West, and
That doesn't happen in sports very often, of any kind.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, we signed a big name player who's definitely a major reason that we made the turnaround. But also, the new coach changed our formation, put players in different positions, and they really took to them. And we have a rookie who's a guy from Seattle. His father is actually the team doctor, the team medic.
Huh.
Cool.
And he has really put the team on his back and helped us get to where we are. And it's just been a fantastic season to be where we are now. If you asked me midway through the season if we would have been here, I would have said, no way, not a chance.
This sounds like a movie. This is incredible. This
it
story,
was
this
pretty
storyline.
awesome, yeah.
So, Trick, did you play soccer? Like, how did you get into, I'm assuming it's your favorite sport.
It is now. I played like youth soccer, like the YMCA sort of stuff. And
Right.
I stopped playing when people started complaining because I was too big. I'm not even joking. Like when I was a little kid, I was like 10 years old, and they were like, "Why does that team have a 14-year-old on there?" And it just was awkward, and I wasn't having fun, and so I played more basketball and things like that. And honestly, a combination of my wife and my old bosses get a lot of credit for why I got into soccer. Like even before I joined Wizards, I was the World Cup in 2012, or I guess.
Yeah, it was
the World
2012.
Cup 2010. It was the 2010 World Cup. That's what it
okay.
was. And that was sort of starting to get into it. Orlando had a team that was getting attention, so we were going to get season tickets. And then I got the job at Wizards, and we moved to Seattle, and Seattle had an MLS team.
Yeah.
And also, not only did they have an MLS team, they didn't have a basketball team. And basketball was my main sport before that.
Way to pour
And-
salt in all the wounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor
I still think about
Sonics
it.
fans.
I still think about
No,
it. pretty
I would eagerly welcome back the Sonics.
I would too.
Yeah.
Please come back, Sonics. That's fantastic, though. I'm glad that you got a team. Yeah, I mean, the Sounders, too, have had kind of a great uprising in Seattle in terms of popularity, how well they've done, and that combined with the Seahawks doing well. And hey, if you guys win if we win the MLS this year, I mean, like that, Seattle's having a pretty good swing around from when I believe ESPN called it the worst year in sports went to Seattle. Because we had an awful football team, we lost the Sonics and a whole bunch of other stuff. But things are turning around. It's getting sunny in Seattle.
Yeah.
Finally.
metaphorically.
Yeah, metaphorically.
Yeah, right now it's cold and rainy.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Sounds like Seattle. Sounds like home.
That's right.
Well, very cool. Soccer is, I should watch more of it. I played it all through high school,
Oh, really?
and and it's a game I really like. It's tough on the sleeping schedule, like we were talking about earlier.
Oh, to watch, yeah, because the games are all
because
international.
a lot of the games are international, and so if you want to watch them live, you got to watch them at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, some of them are at 4. Most of them, honestly, if you wake up at 7 on a weekend, then you'll be able to catch the majority of the European games
That's
for
the same as
for
4 in the morning
West
to me.
Coast. Fair, absolutely fair. I'm a morning person, so I'm usually
okay.
up at 6 or 7, regardless of the day.
Is it because of your dog that you're a morning person? Because I'm becoming more of a morning person
Yeah.
because of my dog.
Yeah, me too.
No, actually, Elwood wakes up after I wake up.
Wow.
He will sleep in his chair until I wake him up to give him breakfast.
That's amazing.
And then after I feed him and take him out, he goes back to sleep.
I would kill for that. My dog does nothing like that.
My
Well,
dog
your
sleeps a
dog's
lot.
not as cool as mine, Josh.
No, not at all.
Ooh,
My
there
dog
it
is
is.
like loud, bangs around if she's in her crate. If she's not in her crate, she'll, smack me in the face with her paws,
Yeah.
jump up on the bed. I don't even want to talk about it. All right.
Trick, thank you so much for joining the show this week. It's been a pleasure. I'm so glad that we finally got to get you back on. And of course, I'm sure you'll be coming back as well to talk more about either this deck or what you've been doing to upgrade. Now, can you inform the listeners where to find you on the interwebs?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. It's been great. I'm excited we finally made it happen. You can find me on Twitter, TrickMTG. You can find me on Reddit as Trick Jarrett. That's I'm there on the Magic subreddit most of the times. And then, of course, you can find me on Daily MTG and through Wizards. I'm not as often seen forthright, but I'm usually behind the scenes. I'll be at some Pro Tours. Hopefully, I'll be at some GPs next year. We will have to wait and see, but it's been awesome. And if you ever do see me, I usually got a commander deck with me. Let me know, and hopefully we can get a game in.
Sweet.
Trick is very easy to spot because he towers above all the other people.
Yes. Very true. Hopefully we'll see you at GP Vegas. I think we're all playing on the Tending next year.
yeah.
That would be a great...
I will almost definitely be there, whether in work responsibility or just there to play commander.
Perfect.
Sweet.
Perfect.
All right, time for the cleanup step. Make sure to listen and check out our sister podcast, The Masters of Modern. Alex Kessler and Ben Bateman talk about the modern format and all things competitive Magic. You can find them on Twitter at the MMCast and right next to us on collected.company, our new Magic hub.
And our editor for the show is Terry Robertson, who does the video content. Again, you can see every card that we talk about and our lovely faces. That sounded weird. On youtube.com/The Command Zone Podcast. It's a great way to watch the show if you, for instance, don't know what the card is or forget what it is after we say it, like a minute later and we're still talking about it, blabbering on. So you guys make sure you check that out, youtube.com/The Command Zone Podcast. And special thanks to Geoffrey Palmer for making the living card animations that start and end the show. You can find him on Twitter at LivingCardsMTG.
Another thing you can find on the YouTube channel is our newest gameplay video. It's called Game Nights. You want to check it out. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. We're hoping to do more of them. Make sure to visit our Patreon so you can support that. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter at JFWong and at Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.